everything we say is going to be, you know, on the internet, and then it's going to go into space. And like in 100 million light years, there's another, you know, a species of that's going to
hear what we say, and they may say, these are the coolest people we've heard in a long time.
Yeah, right. In like 50 or so thousand light years.
But to paint a visual picture on that, if any of you have seen the movie Contact with Jodie Foster that came off of the book that that an astrophysicist did, which was anyway. In the very beginning of that film, they show the planet Earth and all the other planets, and they start moving the camera out in space of Earth and some sounds coming off of Earth. And then it goes to the next planet, next planet, next planet. And all the sounds are slowly kind of moving through space. And it's like, first of all, there's something from the 30s. They have the Olympics from the 30s. Then they have Hitler saying something. Then they have some music playing. And they move up from maybe like 1930s up to the 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s. And each one is behind the other. And as it moves through space, and you see it through the solar system, which is cool, but then it goes into outer space. It goes beyond there. And it's amazing, you know, stars, other galaxies, and it's amazing that that information does go out there. But this, the beginning of the movie, they brilliantly, Carl Sagan, see my brain comes back after a minute, wrote the book. And, but, you know, to visually see that, it's stunning and it's amazing. So if anybody wants to take that movie out, Contact, all you have to do is watch the beginning. But then you'll be hooked into it. It's a great movie. I don't know why I'm plugging a movie, but Jim started with that. And
well, it's very much like Powers of 10.
Right.
Which,
you know that,
there
right?
we go,
Powers of 10, which is, which is Ames did?
Yep, yep.
Yeah, I love that. In college, I discovered that the National Gallery, the Gallery of Science or whatever.
Yeah, yeah.
Anyway, just to finish your thought, so now...
I went off on a tangent.
Eventually, they're going to get like all of Trump's tweets.
Oh,
can you imagine?
Man, I think they're going to be right next to Hitler's, probably.
Yeah, yeah. Let me introduce Jerry Mischak. That is why we're here, to hear about Jerry's, you know, life.
Life and work.
Life and art, and Jerry Mischak.
Thank
That's
you.
what we're going to call this.
Well, the wonderful thing about this, guys, is that both Jim and I grew up in Newark.
Well, we were both born in Newark.
Born in Newark, okay. You were smart to get out.
I got out of there.
All right.
But you were in Newark until when?
Till I left for college.
Wow.
My mother had a beauty parlor, so that was wonderful. I could always listen to her and the people in the beauty shop conversations, and it was like a babysitter when I was little. But we don't need to go further into that.
Well, was there anything about that you know, was a creative outlet? Was there any artistic thing in the
Well, you know, I felt like my mother being a beautician, you know, she was always cutting hair, doing something with hair, so that felt like, you know, there was some art aspects there. You know, there has to be. You know, we all care about our hairs cut. I even had my hair by a new guy up in Providence, and he just used the razor. He just used the razor cutting it. So he's from Italy, he's great, and it was only like $35, so I'm going to go back to him instead of going to the, you know, the big shops that they have that are kind of all the same, whatever they're called.
That's pretty...
But anyway, so why I go off on this tangent, sorry about that. But I guess the cool thing that happened, because the beauty parlor was in the house, I would be in a living room, and we had turned the dining room and the front porch into the beauty parlor, and it had a linoleum floor and all the accoutrements that would be in dryers. But as a little kid, I would be hanging out in the living room listening to, you know, believe it or not, Ghost Riders in the Sky, I mean, that was one of my favorite songs. And, but I would hear these conversations with my mother and her clients that came in, and it was a soothing thing. It was like I was in the womb again or whatever. But I think that had some effect. And then I got into monsters. I loved monsters, and I was watching John Zackerly. He was out of PIX in New York. And,
he was kind of like the Dracula. He would introduce all the horror movies,
yeah,
right?
He was great. Zachary. Yeah. And he's great. He was like funny, and we loved, I and my friends loved all the movies on there. But the reason I bring that up is, I never, you know, I don't think I ever made like art, paintings, or sculptures when I was a kid. But what I did make is I made monsters, you know, and because I was just obsessed with this. And a friend and I, one of my friends who loved them also, we would be in my basement in Newark, and we had a Super 8 camera, and so we would kind of fake some goofy movies that were really horrible. And, but I would make these monsters out of like an old pair of pants and a shirt and a Halloween mask, and fill them with newspaper. So, and that did it for me. That was like great to have this physical thing. So I think that's sculpture, you know, that really is sculpture. You know, it's like, it doesn't have to be other materials. I mean, this is like raw materials, funky materials. But the cool thing is, I bring up Zachary, is I had this notion to send it to him. So my dad said, okay, we'll go down to FedEx. I put it in a big box, you know, and it was in a box, and it was just this monster in the box. And we sent it off to him, and, you know, a couple of weeks went by, nothing. Then all of a sudden, one show, he comes, and one of my ghoul friends in Newark just sent me this big box, and he pulls out this monster and that I made, and my phone rang off the hook with all of my friends calling, like, oh, I can't believe it. And, you know, so I was really, that was pretty wonderful for that to happen. And, but I think it wasn't until later in my life that I started dealing with art a little more seriously. But I do feel that that introduction, making something, it's about making something.
I have a great idea. Let's send a box to MoMA.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. And we'll put a monster in it.
Yeah.
Put a monster in it. Yeah. Just the address and the right person.
I wonder if they have that tape anywhere. That would be incredible.
Oh man.
I read also something about the Mummy. That you love the Mummy.
Love the Mummy.
And that you had like.
Well.
Let me digress. When I first met Jerry was about 24 years ago or so at the downtown art fair. I had a room. It wasn't a booth. It was old offices that had not been used for many years. There they go. And they gave them away for free to art dealers. So I had a room, and there was one room next to mine, and I walked in, and if I remember right, there was like a table, and it was like, it looked like kind of a chair shape, and am I right on that?
Yeah, exactly.
But it was all covered with like this colored something. It was like, was it one color?
Many colors of duct tape.
It was duct tape. And you had duct tape, like objects on a table.
Yeah, well, you know, it was, the opportunity came up, and I said, what am I going to do? Because I was working with duct tape. The reason I was working with duct tape, and not to make this go on until 12 at night, but the reason I was working with duct tape is I had collected all these catalogs, and I didn't even think I'm going to talk about this yet, but I had got all these catalogs because we had, you know, our daughter was born, and all these catalogs came to the house constantly, and it was like, what do we do with all these catalogs, you know, and like, yeah, we recycle them or whatever, but I thought, how could I use them, you know, let me try to use them. So I just mounted them on a piece of plywood, and I thought, okay, the easiest thing would be to tape them to the plywood, you know, so this was it, and I'd cut little holes or paint them. But that's what got me started with the duct tape. And when this opportunity happened, I said, well, this is an office. Let's get all the furniture that would be in an office, chairs, table, filing cabinet, and I brought some down with me. And I stacked them all in the center and taped it all. And I had a friend help me. And no kidding, we had to go through 200 rolls of tape, the 2-inch tape. It was just constantly going through it. And it was very exciting for me. And it was the first review in the Times.
It was so original. It was so, I mean, I'd never seen anything like that.
Yeah, that's cool. That's good to do. So, yeah.
And one of my favorite pieces we ever had in the sculpture garden were, I don't know, 4 or 5 sculptures of yours that were duct tape sculptures. The inside was, I don't know what.
All
wood,
kinds of things, whatever it could be.
Whatever it was, somebody's wallet, people, like clothes. And it was just like a magical garden of multicolored duct tape.
Yeah,
and it was fabulous.
That was,
it was unlike anything, in a sculpture garden that you would see.
And the cool thing was like, so what? The tape could hold up to, we realized the tape could hold up to weather. So, it worked for the length of time that it was up there, but it was a crazy kind of fantasy world of shapes and forms.
Because you would see things, and it would look like there might be someone in it, or maybe an object you recognize, and maybe it was.
Yeah.
You would use real objects.
Yeah.
And
sometimes the tape got so thick that if you try to cut it, try to cut through it, it would be, about that thick, because I kept taping it, because there were some parts of the objects that I couldn't cover up entirely, but other parts I needed to kind of hide them. So there was this kind of tension between something you recognize and something that you don't, or what was inside it. The thing is, you can do that for so long, or I could do that for so long. And there was a point where I made so many of these pieces that I felt like, okay, what's next? What's the next thing what's interesting next? And Jim had mentioned I've had 4 solo shows here, but each one was a different show, and this current one right now is a show that I'm 68 years of age. I've learned a lot over the years, but this current show is something that the imagery and the way of making these paintings and the sculptures, I feel there's something I could really go for a long time with it. It's not copying them, but I keep exploring that kind of imagery. So I'm very excited about this work. But the table, I don't know, should I say the table, talk about the table?
Yes.
Well,
the table, the dinner table?
Yeah, the dinner table.
Yeah,
dinner table. The table came out, the table that you see in here really came from after the millennium. Remember how we were all like dealing with the change from 1999 to 2000?
That was our biggest fear, is that, the lights were going to go out at midnight. And now we got
more fears.
We got more fears.
But, I left the dinner table late at night, and after, a wonderful meal and, drinking a lot of water and other things, I look back at the table, and, it's like this table. It tells a story, this table, and I didn't have to do the dishes. If it was my house, I would. But we were able to walk away, and just looking at the glasses and other objects, empty dish plates, forks, piece of cake, everything was left. It had the story, and it just resonated in my brain. Like, that's pretty wonderful. I should tape it. And so I had the opportunity in Pont-Aven, France, and then in Washington, D.C. at a gallery called Industry. That was more a design gallery, but I had an opportunity to set the table up that was 36 feet long. I brought all the objects down and then had people help me and taped over all these objects. And it was orange tape at the time, because when I did it in Pont-Aven, France, the only tape you can get in France is like it's not duct tape, but it was orange tape, and it was more like a rubbery tape, and it wasn't as good, but it worked. And, that was like the beginning of the table business, you know. And since that point, I kind of moved to two-dimensional objects, two-dimensional pieces that I was using tape to describe a table and objects on it. That took a lot of time to do.
Yeah, I love that, you know, from the sculpture using the duct tape, and then you brought in two-dimensional work, and you know, there was something about it you couldn't quite figure out, and then you realize it's pieces of duct tape that made an image or a story. And I think the first ones you brought in were all duct tape. Like, instead of using, if I'm right, you know, instead of using paint, it was all.
It was all tape, and then I started using painting little strips of little brush strokes and gluing them on the bottom, made it like a collage. The background was that. There was always a separation between the background and the table itself. And those pieces, you know, I really enjoyed those pieces. They were keeping me working with the tape. But they would just take, it would take a long time. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but it would take a long time to cut it. And what would happen is, if I'm cutting the tape, because I'd lay the tape down, then cut it on the paper to make the right shape of that it had to be. Sometimes I would cut through the.
Someone's calling you.
Yeah, 10 minutes.
Yeah.
So I would cut through through the paper. So when I'm finished doing the front of the paper, I'd turn it over, and there were all these slice marks that then I'd have to glue little pieces of paper on the bottom of it. Not that you need to know that, but
it was laborious.
Laborious, and you know, those worked and they were fine. And then I reached this point where, okay, what's the next thing? And I had this opportunity in the last couple of years to go to China with 7 other artists, and we would bring our work rolled up, and they would hang it, and we would have a show. We had a show in Beijing and a couple other towns, and usually it was associated with an academy, institute of some sort, that we would do a talk about our work. So it was kind of, you know, educational, but it gave us a chance to put our work up and share it with some other Chinese artists that were going along with us. And the second year I was going to it, we had to make bigger paintings. They complained that I was bringing paintings on paper that was this big. And they said, you have to have bigger ones. So I go to my wife, Wendy Edwards, who's a wonderful artist as well, going with me. And, you know, I said, Wendy, like, after 30 years, both of us are teaching, okay, or so. And I go, Wendy, how can I make a big painting of this? I mean, she goes, just blow up a small one. And I go, I could do that? So here, I've been teaching a long time, and I could ask my wife, you know, like, I can do this? And she goes, what the hell? Yeah, do it. And I went, whoa, this is great. It's so crazy how this happens. Sometimes you need somebody to okay it or tell you.
So somebody really wants you.
Yeah, if it's the
and
police.
Actually, it's Wendy.
Oh, yeah.
Should I answer and tell her, like, you know?
Well, but let's stop. No, we better not.
Hello? Where are you?
Yeah.
All right.
Just a question she's bringing in.
Here. But actually, that's, what is it like being married to another artist? You've been together like
forever. Yeah. No, for like since we met in Wisconsin. University of Wisconsin in 1978.
Okay, and so you're both artists.
Both artists.
Having success and having shows and work in museums and stuff. And I read that Jerry and Wendy bought is it Rhode Island?
In Rhode Island.
Rhode Island, an old fire station, and turned it into their house and
studios. And
where the fire trucks were, they put a wall down the middle, and then each side is the
we have studio. Yeah.
You have like a hole you could look through and.
No, we can't. We're married, but we can't hang out in each other's studio like that. But
so how does that work? In other words, like with, you know, I mean, being married is in and of itself challenging at times. And so you've got your art, you've got your egos, you've got, you know, I imagine that it must be kind of.
You know what? Maybe we're just lucky, but you know, we've been in love and happy together all these years, you know, and I think it comes out of a respect for the work, you know, and I mean, I respect her as an artist and as a person, and she respects me as an artist and a person, and you know, sometimes I'll go, Wendy, you know, come on, I'm like, this stuff really sucks that I do. How could you even like this? She goes, shut up, you know, you're a great artist. Don't, you know. We support each other. You know, it's just maybe the right kind of mix, what happens.
Yeah.
But she teaches, she's been teaching, she's going to retire this spring. I'm going to retire next year. And because she's going to turn 70, I'll turn 70 next year. And we could be in the studios the whole time. She's been teaching at Brown for 42 years or 30 some years. I've been teaching at RISD for a long time. So we're going to miss students. You know,
so you teach sculpture and painting.
Yeah. Classes I do, I allow both things to happen. Not formal sculpture, but whatever, you know, like these things. You know, these are styrofoam and plaster. So, you know, I try to introduce like easy ways of students can do it, make the work. But
so you're retiring.
We're retired. We'll both retire, and then we have our studios, so we can work. You know, and maybe then we'll be at each other's throats. But you know, actually, it's sometimes Wendy will give me advice, and I'll try to give her advice. She's really a good painter,
What is that?
Well, I mean, she knows paint. She puts it on in a luscious way. She's always enjoyed and has kind of come up with kind of inventive ways of putting it down at times. But I think a painter's painter is somebody who just loves painting, and other artists see that and are inspired by it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Just to push ahead, so you know, from the tables, from the duct tape, have moved to these pieces because of China. And I made these larger paintings, and when I got home after that trip, I said I have to make some more pieces, and I started working on this chipboard. And it's the smaller pieces that are in the gallery, the small gallery in the back of the space. And I just started painting these on this chipboard, drawing them first, drawing the images first. And they were inventive. They were just totally inventive pieces. And the table was always kind of the beginning part of it. And I'd do the drawing and then paint the table first and figure out what colors the other pieces were. But I want them to be abstract, but I want them to be kind of real. And it's funny because here, some wonderful people here put together a great, which I'm really happy for, press release. But there's one line I'll just say is like, they're dreamlight psychological imaginings.
What's going on here? And what I love about the tables is, you know, Jim Dine has his bathrobes. They're sort of like self-portraits. And if you think of it, if you look at someone, if you live with someone and you look at their bathrobe, it starts to have like a life of its own. Like you can see the person, you can feel that person, you know. And a table that everyone is, you know, around, eats around, sits, talks, you know, has a lot of meaning. So what's going on?
Well, you know, the table, besides having that meaning, has everything that you own on it. And guaranteed, if you put any flat surface in where you're living, if it's a tent or if it's a house, you're going to eventually put a lot of stuff on it. I mean, it's a frightening kind of accountant that might keep it clean all the time. But it's usually you just throw stuff on there till the time comes that visitors are coming over and you have to clean it.
You're like, where's the table?
Where's that table with all this stuff? And so I started, after the tape pieces that were a little more stiff but beautiful, I started breaking the legs and making the tables kind of tip and fall, and the legs are cracking, and the table's falling down, or cracking in half, and things on the table then would be spilling. Whatever's on there be slipping off, or if there's something holding a liquid would be spilling out, and the liquid was active. The thing is showing something coming out of a bottle or a container, has some kind of activity. Initially, I wanted to show that kind of everyday life gets crazy, and some problems happen. Or maybe in the world problems happen, or maybe, what we've been dealing with lately. So, I mean, there's just like these problems, and they may not be big, terrifying problems, but they're problems nonetheless.
Not necessarily worldly, but like domestic.
Yeah.
Chaos.
Oh, and there's always still domestic stuff. It doesn't mean about Wendy and I mean, it's just about like, there's the big picture and the little picture. The big picture, somebody says, hey, how are you doing? I think the big picture is like, well, I love my wife. My dog is happy, and, I'm going to retire, and what's the little picture? Oh, well, I had this, root canal last week. The cat doesn't eat enough. I got to clean the litter to take out the trash. I tripped on the rug, and my one shoe is too tight, but the other one is okay. These little things, and those are the things we live with, we could laugh at and enjoy. So here, in this, it's like, why not have the table turn completely and let the things fall out from underneath? And the hands in the table are kind of like somebody's here, and the dog is to have some living thing in the scene, and that kind of gives it life. But these are not still lives, they're kind of active lives, So that's why the spilling and everything is important for me, or why I enjoy doing it, because it has things falling off, and like these are representing like cracks of little pieces falling off as well. And I just kind of invent the pieces, and the color is very important. And kind of, I try to not go too far and try to not overdo it and try to keep it in a wash. But the drawing is still obvious, and I'm, it's not like Rembrandt drawing. It's not perfect, but it's my drawing. So, I mean, each piece that I do is me trying to reach that honesty and directness, and that kind of walk that fence of realism and kind of abstraction. And I think that electrifies the objects.
And Jerry, we were talking about like some accidents that happened. There's a drip over here. There's a little something that kind of like a drip and I wanted to ask you about just accidents in general. And I also wanted to point out the sculpture, which I love what you did. You sort of took and made three-dimensional the table and the glasses and the drinks spilling out.
Well, let's. I have to break in for a second. Let me tell you the truth about these. That when I first brought this work here, and I'm saying, like, I'm a sculptor as well. I've had these other pieces, other wonderful sculptures that have been here, and some newer ones. And I said, oh, Jim, maybe I should bring these. And he's going like, wait, maybe you should do a sculpture of something that's in the paintings. Thank you very much, Jim. He, said, like, let's make that connection. I went, shit, man, great idea. And so he kind of coerced me into.
Well, I'm glad, okay, I'll take.
Being challenged with doing these.
Yeah. Well, you certainly.
Yeah.
Are up for the challenge.
Yeah. So I can, this is a nice avenue for me to go down, making more of these, and each time making, like, how is it going to be presented and how many things. Much more difficult in the sculpture than in the flat pieces.
I hope everyone, when we're done, goes and looks at all the smaller drawings, because they're just fabulous. You know, it's,
yeah, there's two things about it if you look at the smaller. One way I'd like to look at them is to have 30 of them on a wall, or 20 of them on a wall, and pretty close to each other, and see it as an entire piece, because they're 14 by 17-inch pieces. That's one way to look at them. I think as I made them in my studio, I put them on a wall that wasn't the active wall, and I started putting them in that grid, and it made a lot of sense. But they are also seen as individual pieces as well, So it's interesting working on them because they can be shown or be seen two different ways on them. They all together,
yep, yeah,
or separately.
Yeah, yeah, they're great framed, and then that whole wall is fantastic, as certain things pop out.
Yes, yes.
And so earlier today you had a group of like a dozen students here that you were talking with.
There was a class from Brown University that came up.
Now, did you teach at Brown?
I used to teach at Brown. Now I just teach at RISD.
Right, right. And so...
and URI. I teach 2 sculpture classes at URI. URI could be in that class. It doesn't either.
What about teaching art? How I'm just curious as to what you tell, what you've learned, what you tell your students that after these years as an artist, and also do the classes help you with your art? I mean, do you find that
Yes, yes. Okay, I think in relation to my teaching the sculpture classes at URI, I have 5 projects that the students do during the semester. And, a couple of the projects are involved with plaster. And it got me just messing around with plaster a little more. So, bingo, all of a sudden I'm going, okay, styrofoam and plaster. Directly influenced from teaching there. Because when you start working at a school, you have to come up with ideas and a kind of a curriculum, and it worked out that way. And at RISD, I teach a monster class that is
a monster class?
It's a monster class. Well, going back to Zachary, I show 6 different sci-fi horror movies, and each one represents a project. So, to be quick is like. The first project they have to do is beauty and repulsion. Okay, so, and that's a good way to start, because we all think differently what's beautiful, what's repulsive. I'd show Jean Cocteau's Beauty and the Beast from 1946, black and white film, which is beautiful, it's surrealistic, amazing if you haven't seen it. Corny it's really corny, but it's beautiful. And right after watching that, we watched The Elephant Man. And that's so gritty, and England at that period of time, there's a really wonderful clash between the 2 films. I had shortened the films. I had edited them down so they wouldn't be the entire length of the films. But anyway, students then have to work on that subject, on that project, or that prompt. But I allow them to use paint, styrofoam, any kind of 3D material. But I love the films. I don't know how many years, how many times I've watched that, and Invasion of the Body Snatchers from '56, and the best. Why am I talking about this?
That sounds like a fun class. That's an art class.
It is, yeah.
So when they watch the Invasion of the Body Snatchers, and they do art, do you grade them like you're like, I don't see there's no body
No,
here.
it doesn't. It's a prompt just for them to do it. So
they can do anything, right?
Yeah, they can do anything. So invasion is invasion of your privacy, invasion of.
So I mean that's amazing.
Yeah.
Because you were talking about the monster movies growing up.
Yeah.
And you weren't sure, but now you're showing monster movies.
There were 6 of us sitting around a table having dinner, friends from RISD and stuff, and we're just like, things. When you're having a dinner and you're enjoying yourself.
You gotta mix it up.
You start coming up with ideas, and I said, how about if I do this? And it took a lot of work to edit every film, but for instance, okay, Invasion. What could you do invasion? I had one student during our critique. Is it okay to be talking about like teaching here?
No.
No, okay.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know if that's interesting. You know, but this one student who's now a lawyer, okay, and I loved him. We're going through the critiques, and I come up, and on the wall, you know, people have their work up. On the wall, there's a manila envelope. And I'm going like, what could this be for invasion? I'm trying to like, okay. And he goes, just, you know, take it down, look into it. So I take it down, I pull things out, and he looked up every possible site on the internet to show some, you know, into my private life. And, you know, there was a picture of my wife and my daughter there. And, I mean, things I didn't even know they had it on the internet.
Yikes.
And luckily, you know, that, well, that conviction was 7 years, so they didn't put it on the internet. No, I'm only kidding. But luckily, there wasn't anything really weird, you know. But that was like, I thought, that is like the coolest piece. Like, he came out of left field with that. And then another year with that, these two girls in the class had a big box. Here's the big box again, right? This box. Yep. And they said, could we show this piece at the end of the critique? And I go, sure, sure. So we do our critique, and I go, okay, you guys are ready. And there's a pedestal for a model in the center that raised about this high. They said, oh, we'll put the box, let's put a little table on that, put the box up so the box is like this high. And they come up and we're going like, what's in this box? This is like, come on, what could be in this box? I had no idea. So they kind of rustle it up a little bit and open it. And out of the box, 5,000 ladybugs come flying all over the place. They fly out into the windows, onto the ground, they're climbing over, and they're going, invasion. And, you know, and I felt like, okay, this is gonna be great. Like, how am I going to lose my job with all these ladybugs? And but I think somebody did say like a year later somebody did see a ladybug like on the first floor or whatever. But other people, you know, depending on what if they're doing animation or they're illustrators or whatever, you know, they're doing more conventional stuff. But it's these students that use the prompt that, you know, they just come up with something crazy and wonderful. And that's really exciting for someone teaching.
What I was going to ask, I was just wondering, like, do you have a student once in a while that's like, you go, wow, this is somebody special. You know, I'm thinking about, you know, people teaching piano, and then, you know, and all of a sudden you hear like it's like a Beethoven. You're like, wow.
Yeah.
Do you get those kind of things?
Yeah, you know, there's some people that, you know, they're just committed. They're totally committed.
So is that what it is? Is it the commitment? Is it the 90% perspiration?
90%, it's always perspiration.
Yeah.
Yeah. You got to work. And you know, with this class today, to use that in this question, the class that came today, you know, I tried to tell them that I have a student currently in this other class, the class I teach in the spring, which is painting refocus, which we use kind of 3D materials to do paintings with, and flattish kind of paintings. But this wonderful student who is at RISD just for the semester, she does this great sculptures, a couple pieces, and they're really wonderful. And then at the end, I'm talking to her about this, and she goes, people say, I better think more. I should think more. And I'm going, what? You know, just work. Keep working the way you are. So someone gave her this incorrect advice or they didn't like what she was doing, and they said, well, you have to think more. And she was just making these pieces. They were beautiful and they're wonderful. And she is thinking. You know, you're thinking. Right. You know? So there's crazy advice that's given sometimes, and maybe as a young artist, you have to choose who you're going to listen to, and sometimes that can make Two Roads to the Virgin in the Woods. I took the One Less Travel, made all the difference, right? Good old Robert Frost. But the thing is, I tried to tell this group of students that, you know what, just work, just, you know, get work done. Everything's going to come in. That's the hardest thing to do, you know, to perspire. And Heather, who was the professor in the class, said, Jerry, this is so crazy. We just went to this, we saw this other artist today who said the same exact thing. And the funny thing about it, she was a conceptual artist. She doesn't paint, do anything. She does great conceptual pieces. And she's saying the same thing. I'm making these pieces, and I'm saying the same thing. And I just thought, I felt great. I thought, this is so wonderful that, two different kind of artists are kind of saying the same thing to the students, as that advice.
Yeah. That's great advice, no matter what field.
Yeah.
Just do it. Just Yeah.
Yeah. Let the thinking will happen. The thinking will happen.
Right.
It's there. It's there already.
Yeah. How do you start?
Yeah.
You just start.
Yeah. Well, de Kooning, right? Remember, he'd come to his studio and have the white canvas, and he'd throw like 2 lines down. He goes, now I got something to fight against. It was like classic.
Yeah. That's great. That's fantastic. So I thought we're kind of winding down, and I want to, if there's any questions, and also anything that you want to pull everything together.
Do I need to?
No, you do not. You do not need to. You definitely do not need to.
I feel I've been yapping a lot here.
Yeah.
I've been talking a lot here.
Yeah.
That's why I took my microphone out for a while so you wouldn't hear it.
You wore the batteries down.
They were brand new batteries. You see, it's that Newark in me that did that. But I mean, if you guys,
wait, I heard you were like a star football player.
Where did you hear that?
Is that true or not?
Well, I made All City.
All City?
Yeah,
in
All
Newark?
City, yeah.
That's like all country in most countries.
Well, I was a lineman. At no glory, just like, so.
I just found that funny for some reason, just because, you're such a nice guy, and I don't know, like, especially when you were a lineman, it seemed like you were you like a.
Guess what? I didn't play football after high school. That's how much I liked it.
Right.
But it was a great experience, and the coolest thing about it is it was such a diverse school that it was a team, and I really, loved the teammates. That teammate, that brother next to you. We all function as a, helping each other. If I didn't open a hole for somebody, the fullback wouldn't have been able to go through it. And Frank Shepard was his name. I like him.
What was his name?
Frank Shepard.
Frank Shepard.
Yeah, so he was the fullback on the 43 dive.
And this was like 1960, what year?
1968.
1968 in Newark, and the riots were like 67, 68?
Yeah, they were.
And it was a very mixed city, and so I'm sure that was pretty amazing being on that I would think, that team back then. Yeah,
we, we all knew who we were, and unfortunately the riots happened, and it was like, the truth of it, the riots were like watching MSNBC, which I love, but you turn it on and they're all talking about, the contagion, and you just hear too much of it and you go, okay, this is all fact, but everybody's freaking out and they shouldn't. But the riots were confined to a small section of the city, and everybody was thinking like, oh man, everybody's going to come to the neighbor, it's going to be a war, and people blew it out, and that's the first time I was realizing how idiotic people are and how they can just be fear mongers in a way, and it's so untrue. You don't get the right, and but anyway, that was over at a certain period of time.
Yeah, cool.
Newark, okay.
Yeah, Newark. I was in Westfield then, and I was worried. I was 20 miles away, and I thought rioters were going to, take
and
the
cars,
house.
and with machine guns on top of the cars.
Yeah. Well, things don't change.
Any questions?
Any questions? Ted.
Jerry, I love your art. I really do.
Thank you.
Especially like your chair where you did it with either paper or tape.
Oh, thank you. That blue one? That blue one? Right.
Which one?
I think it's the yellow chair.
Oh, yeah.
Let me be wrong on that.
You mean a real chair? Like you could sit on?
Picture.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
yeah. Okay,
Because
yeah, yeah.
Jerry also did some chairs that were actually functional, which I love. They were
Yeah.
like,
You like the blue one
the
especially.
blue one was amazing. And I don't know if it was an old chair that was broken or whatever, but it was you could
Yeah.
sit on it.
Yeah.
It was just this incredible.
Looked odd, more like a sculpture than not. And, but you know what? There's 2 of those pieces in the restaurant next door.
Oh, yeah,
Hanging
yeah.
on the wall.
Yeah, they were three-dimensional. They were tape and paint and three-dimensional.
And I used the paper and I made it like a pillow out of it. And thanks so much. I mean, I love those. You know, that was such a breakthrough for me to kind of put that 3D in there. And
The question is, why furniture? Why not a wheelbarrow typical, or a bicycle, or a car crash? And why not more people? What made you focus on furniture?
well, it came out of that first working with the table. And it's like Jim, maybe the way Jim was talking about Dine's bathrobe, you know, it's like the table also became this kind of object for me. And I was able to manipulate the situation that it was in. But I have incredible respect for designers, and especially dealing with students. I think really cool things happen in this world where the young ones coming up, you know, they mesh, you know, design and sculpture together, you know, architecture and sculpture. It's the meshing of design and the formal arts, you know, that gives us something new. It's something fresh, something exciting.
So it's not I'll call it like the table behind you, it's not the fact that the table is crashed and fallen and dishes and liquid are falling everywhere. That isn't the real focus?
No, well, it's the, you know, I guess it's the table that comes back into the picture. And what could happen to the table that could make me come up with a new scenario? Okay. Maybe if that answers it. And so when you look at the ones in the back, if you haven't already, you know, I started breaking the tables. I started breaking the legs so they tip. So it gives me that invention, and it gives me that challenge to try to come up with kind of a new setup of what could happen or what could be. I hope I can, you know, there's a lot of stuff rattling around in this head, you know, so if I can keep it coming out, that's what's good. But thank you for that question.
Yeah, I'm sure you will. Anybody else? Any questions out there in Instagram land?
No, no.
Not yet.
No? All right.
Great.
Well, Jerry,
It's been a pleasure.
thank you so much.
It's been a pleasure.
This is,
Yeah, get that picture.
and thank you guys for coming.
Thank you.
That was great, yeah.